What's up, Fin fans? I'm Jim Gries. Call me Gries, and bye-week research. Good Lord, I'm still trying to wake up from that Saints-Falcons game.
Hey, Jess Green here. I am refreshed, revived, renewed, coming off that bye weekend, baby. Here we go.
Kyle Krabs, host Locked on Dolphins, ready to get on the road to 1-0 this week against the Saints.
Fins up. It's the Dolphin Squad. Everything Miami Dolphins, every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from South Beach. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Sunshine, speed, and squad goals. The Dolphin Squad Show starts now.
All right, we are live on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you're not listening to us live, that is because after we go live on YouTube, we upload, you download Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Stitcher, Podbean, and of course, Roku on the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day, the Locked On Podcast Network. That's Z, that's Kyle. I'm Gries. It's the bye week edition #1 of your Dolphin Squad Show. This is the time when we're not normally on Wednesdays at this time, but here we are on your Monday. Dolphins had Sunday off, and oh man, just that research. I talked about it, Kyle. Show research. Oh, give me my time back. I mean, there were some great NFL games yesterday. A lot of like miraculous finishes. Cowboys, Eagles down the stretch. Look at the Giants game against the Lions, the Bears, the Steelers. Some really great games, but notice how none of those games I'm mentioning, none of them. Saints Falcons, and that's the one we had to watch to get ready for this show here today.
Yeah, I have a stat for you, and it puts the Saints team in perspective. They have 3 offensive touchdowns in the last calendar month, and their bye week was in there. But since October 19th, they've scored 3 offensive touchdowns, and there's been a quarterback change in there. Now Alvin Kamara has a knee sprain, and he left the game against the Falcons. Their only only offensive touchdown in that game was a pick 6 by Jesse Bates at safety. So they're a team that's coming in, turning the ball over a lot. They got a bunch of injuries. They're musical chairs at quarterback, trying to figure out what their young kids are. You've got extra rest coming into the game. My expectations this week are pretty high, needless to say.
Yeah, and Z for sure for the Dolphins looking at this game. And you're getting guys like Jack Jones is on the McAfee show. They're doing the celebrity tour now that you won 3 out of 4 and 2 in a row. But, man, I mean, sitting back looking at that game, you have to just really feel like if you execute the way you have been with the run game and the defense remains opportunistic the way it has, you have to feel really good going into this game.
Yeah, that's the one thing I saw watching that game yesterday was Saints couldn't stop the run. And that's one thing we've been doing really good is, running the football. And we have to take advantage of it this week playing these Saints because they're scrambling up front. The front 7 can't stop that run at all.
No, they can't. And they're having a hard time running the ball at all. On offense, they haven't been able to do that. And then you become predictable with the 2-headed young guys at quarterback. And there are a couple of young guys who are just cutting their teeth in the NFL. And, it's been back and forth with them, Kyle, but it doesn't matter who the quarterback's been for New Orleans. It's been the lack of a running game and their inability to stop the run. It kind of plays right into Miami's hands. We've talked about Achane being one of the top running backs in the league recently. Obviously, Taylor's been up there as well. But as the calendar turns and you're starting to see more cold weather games and you're starting to see more of these playoff contenders establish themselves and make that footprint, you're starting to see the running game take hold more. And so the Dolphins right where they need to be on the schedule. That time of year, obviously a couple of teams lost yesterday, Kyle, but just keep winning, just keep taking care of business in-house and see where it leads you. But, obviously a good time of the year to be getting things going in the right direction.
Yeah, it was the stark contrast from watching the Saints yesterday versus like the Rams and how they played on Sunday Night Football against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You talk about, this time of year and teams that are peaking at the right time and playing their best football. And the Rams have played 5 teams currently in the playoff field the last 6 weeks, and their average margin of victory is 18.5 points, right? Like they're smoking teams, playing good football. I'm not putting Miami in that category, but you mentioned winning 3 out of 4 and the nature in which you win against Buffalo and the nature in which you win against Atlanta, and that Atlanta team just beat the Saints by 2 touchdowns. and held them without an offensive score. Now you get the bye week. Now we're getting some guys back from the bye with Darren Waller's practice window is opening this week to go with Austin Jackson, and his practice window started when they were prepping for the Commanders. So now he's in his third week of ramp up this week for practice. Expect to see him at right tackle. So you're getting some guys out on the field. You're playing your best football of the season. You're rested. You got extra prep. There's lots of reasons to kind of look at the way that this is trending and feel like Miami, also at home, no less, is in a good position to sustain that momentum that they had going into the bye week.
No doubt about that. Today's episode, by the way, is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Z, and there's going to be some guys that you could get some action on in this Dolphins-Saints game for sure. I mean, Achane has been really good offensively in the backup role. Ollie Gordon, he's the type of guy picking up the short yardage situations. And, you know, they did get stopped a couple of times by Washington on the goal line, which is uncharacteristic. They're usually going to punch that in. Waddle has stepped up nicely as the number one, but Kyle talks about Waller potentially coming back. And as well as this offense has been running the ball, we've been talking a lot, Z, about Tua not being able to throw it. And down the field, forget it. But that intermediate passing game has really suffered. With Waller potentially coming back here soon, that opens that right back up. And that gives even more for Achane in the run game to lane-wise to get going at the point of attack. So that's all good news also. And you could open up that offense even more.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for Waller to get back, to help with, with the pass game for sure, to keep the, someone in the middle, to keep the doubles off of Waddle, as much as possible, and just to open up that middle more, because that's where you score a lot of touchdowns, especially for Tua, you can see, that middle. So I'm excited that they opening his window, because I was a little shaky. You never know with some of those older guys, especially guys been on IR twice basically this year, if he was going to come back, so I'm happy that he's coming back for this team, to help the pass game, with Tua. But again, Mike's got to, even though he's getting another piece back, he's got to stay what he's been doing the last 4 weeks, run the ball. Don't put Tua in bad situations, to make him force it, try to do a 50-50 ball, which he's not good at, and, again, like we were watching games this weekend. I got a good time to, watch the Bears, play and with their young quarterback. Ben's not putting him in a bad situation either. Ben's kind of doing what Mikey's doing now. Run the ball, and only making Caleb, pass the ball when he has to, really. But the only thing that Caleb has that Tua can't do, is not doing is run the ball. Where Caleb will pull the ball down and run for a first down. But again, we just got to make sure we're not making bad mistakes in the pass game and just run the ball this week.
Run the ball this week, no doubt about that for sure. And then when you're looking at the two teams coming up here, Kyle, looking at the Saints against the Falcons and making Kirk Cousins in the rocket chair looking good again out there for Atlanta. They snapped a 5-game win streak. And you look at the one team the Dolphins have lost to, 3 out of 4 they've won, right, and 2 in a row. The Ravens made it 5 in a row over the Jets. So it's kind of interesting. It's all full circle in there, Kyle, where the Ravens are the last team to beat Miami. And they just not an easy time with the Jets. They were a little sluggish, but Henry woke them up a little bit, a couple of touchdowns there. But when you look at the Saints and you look at the Jets, these next 2 opponents for Miami, and you look at the common denominator there, it's what Z said. It's run that football with Achane in that run game, because that's what they have trouble with, these next 2 teams. And that's how you get to within a game of 500 heading into that Pittsburgh game.
Yeah, and that Jets performance was interesting, right? Where they made the change to Tyrod Taylor, and they have 282 yards offense against Baltimore, who's playing great defense right now. But 282 is the second highest total the Jets have had in a game since they played Dallas in Week 5, right? Like they have really struggled to move the ball. So I think there will be some interesting new layers for the matchup against the Jets for the rematch, and Miami potentially getting Austin Jackson and Darren Waller. We know what Waller did the first time these 2 teams played against one another and the success that he had. And the Jets, since that point in time, have traded Quinnen Williams and they traded Sauce Gardner. So I think the Jets are that team that's going to play hard every single week. I just don't think they have the ammunition to keep pace. And as long as you don't beat yourself, like the Ravens, right? They kind of played the the boa constrictor game. The Ravens only had 241 yards of offense in this game. And Lamar Jackson does not look like multi-time MVP Lamar Jackson, right? He's been under 200 passing yards and sub 60% completion in 3 straight games. So they're in a little bit of a slump right now, but Baltimore's saying, hey, we'll sack you in a key spot. You turn the ball over twice. We're going to methodically run the ball. We're not going to put the ball in harm's way. You make a mistake here, gets a little tighter. You make a mistake there, 2 possessions later, it gets a little tighter, and you look up and it's a 13-point win. So I think that's where, for Miami, I would really love to see them kind of take on that psychology as well over the next couple of games against teams like the Saints and teams like the Jets. There's going to be games where the Dolphins go into a game and they're going to be at a talent deficiency relative to the team that they're playing, but I don't think either one of these next 2 games are going to be one of those games. So play that clean script, take advantage of that, and show that you are putting growth forth in your ability to control the flow and the script of the game. And I think that would be one of the ways I'm measuring progress for Miami the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, then they go into Pittsburgh, obviously, and then Cincinnati and Burrow, and obviously all that will be happening with them because he'll definitely be back by then. But, Z, I think the Steelers, regardless of who's playing quarterback for them, they're a tough team. Watching that Bears game, that was like one of those games where you know you're in a dogfight, so you're not just going to go in there and obviously run it down their throats with that front that they have on defense. And so you have a couple of games here and a window in the schedule, and you can hardly ever say this in the NFL, right, where you have 2 games in a row that you know you should win. And every Dolphins got them on the calendar now going, oh, man, we got to win these 2, get to within a game of 500, and then you never know going into play Pittsburgh in a nationally televised game, and then Cincinnati right after that. But as luck would have it, you figure the Jets play the Falcons this week. So it's all full circle with the Saints, Falcons, Jets, and Dolphins right now. But, I mean, it's nice on one hand, Z, to know that you have these 2 teams coming up and you can beat them. But it also, to me, it's like it seems like when everything in your head's telling you should win these games, you have to stay focused even more.
Oh, yes, without doubt. I mean, the coaches are preaching that one game at a time, one day at a time. We got to take care of ourselves. We dug ourselves a hole. We got to climb out of it, and like I'm like a broken record. Every week it's the same thing. We run the ball better. We're shortening the game for our defense, keeping them off the field, getting them rested, getting the corrections, because it's a young defense that needs to talk with Weave on the sidelines, and their position coaches to clean up their mistakes and turnovers. We've been getting turnovers, Another stat from the Bears game I saw, I think they're leading the league in takeaways. I think they're like 23 or 24 takeaways. And what's their record? Again, that's how you do it. The more time the offense gets the ball in their hands, you give a chance, to win games. And again, we got to go out there. We got to strip the ball. We got to, get interceptions on any team we play. But again, it's 1 week at a time. We got the Saints this weekend. We got to roll through them and then worry about the Jets the week after that.
They've only scored 165 points this year, Kyle, the Saints. They're 15 points a game. That's crazy. I mean, that's a low number in the NFL these days for a team to be scoring that few points. So I know the Dolphin defense has to be cranked up for that. And then offensively, I really look for them to get the passing game on track. I know the running game is going to set up everything, but I think that Bills game, we saw what they can do with the passing game. And then if you get a guy like Waller back, and then, Waddle had a couple of drops overseas in Madrid, and that was, one of them was a little behind him. And, they did a lot to try to take him away. They're doubling him down the field, as he likes to say every week. So it'll be interesting to see what New Orleans tries to do defensively against Miami, if they just stack the box and dare Tua to beat them, which I think the more Miami runs the ball, the more we're going to see that. So we'll have to look at that. We have 2 shows this week to do it in, but I think it's exciting to see the Dolphins right here just enjoying this time. It was nice to watch the games yesterday and just kind of be sitting there. I went to the sports bar, and I'm just sitting there looking around at the different TVs, and this team scored, that team scored. Mm-hmm. The balance of power and competitiveness in the NFL is crazy. I mean, close game after close game after close game. So certainly no gimmies on the schedule, Kyle, with this Saints and Jets run coming up. To think where this team was, and looking at the Ravens too, having won 5 in a row, to think what we were talking about when those 2 teams were playing on Thursday Night Football, and now the direction of those 2 teams now. Ravens in a much better position than Miami, obviously, Kyle, but still a couple of more wins here, and you're going to be right there. You might need a little help. KC didn't help too much yesterday getting that win over Indy, but you're starting to look at all those other teams around you in the playoff race now as a Miami fan, and that's crazy.
Yeah, it's the the coveted In the Hunt graphic on CBS with every AFC game, right? And there's sure enough, there's Miami. They're tucked in there at the end of the list. They're in the hunt at 4-7. But this AFC playoff field, I think, is going to be really tough. Even if the Dolphins, I think even if they hypothetically were to run the table, right? I think if they won their last 6 games and get to 10 wins, you've got Buffalo at 7-4. Behind 2.5 games behind New England for the AFC East. So that you're 3 games behind Buffalo right now with 6 to play. Pittsburgh and Baltimore both at 6-5. Obviously, you have a head-to-head opportunity against Pittsburgh. But then in the South, the Texans are 6-5, and man, the defensive performance that they put against the Bills on Thursday night last week was spectacular. And they're going to be getting C.J. Stroud back. They went 3-0 with the backup quarterback in. Jacksonville finds a way to keep winning these games. Denver's at 9-2. They have a head-to-head against Kansas City, but the Chargers are 7-4, and the Dolphins lost that head-to-head matchup already. So
yeah,
I'm not too worried about playoffs, but I want to see the stacking of the wins, right? Like, I think that's where there's value. And hey, let's just mind our own yard. Let's take care of our business. Let's be the best team that we can be. And then when we get to the end of the season, it's time to make decisions on who's here, who's not here, what changes need to be made. Are we making coordinator changes? Are we making coaching changes? Are we keeping everything else in place and just rolling with a new exec? Whatever that looks like. That's where I think Miami's headspace needs to be. And I think that can make them a dangerous team for teams like Pittsburgh and Tampa Bay and New England down the stretch, because if they get locked in that regard, then I think they can be a team that has enough talent to kind of, if they control the script of a game, knock a team off that is thinking about the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt. And Baker Mayfield injured yesterday for Tampa Bay, as well as players around the league. More and more guys are dropping like flies. We need to take a break. Speaking of stacking wins, day by day, you can do that with Peloton, and we're about to show you how. One of the things you can do with them, and then we'll come back. A lot more coming your way on the Squad Show, guys. The momentum, the GM search. Kyle's had a lot to say about that. Kyle and Z before the show. We're getting into it. We'll talk about that as well. More of a Saints preview and a look back at what we saw from other NFL teams that might be in that category Kyle was talking about, that the Dolphins might be able to play spoiler against, or even possibly have a chance to make the playoffs as the season comes to a close. It's your Dolphins Squad Show on the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, and your team every day.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go, while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
There we go. All right, guys, before we move too far on with the Dolphins, and look at Z's tall up in the middle there. He's got the nature behind him. I just wanted to talk about a little bit about what we've been seeing with teams in the division and teams around the Dolphins. What in the world, Kyle, I'm going to start with you. The Bills, right? We talk about the Dolphins beating the Bills all the time because that was like a benchmark and a signature win. But the Falcons beat the Bills, the Dolphins beat the Bills, and then the Texans beat the Bills. So it's been every other game for a loss for Buffalo, and New England has really taken control of the division as the Bills have been sliding away, Kyle.
Yeah, it's I think Buffalo's kind of put themselves in a tough spot. You got 9 turnovers in the last 3 games. I mean, offensively, that is not the MO of the Buffalo Bills. And I think they have historically been a team that's been very opportunistic in winning the turnover battle, and they do a great job with their zone spacing and coverage rules with Sean McDermott. And they've been there a really long time, and they kind of know what the deal is. But They got some injuries on the defensive side of the ball. They've really been hurting to stop the run. They've given up 197 yards rushing in 2 of the last 3 games that they've played defensively. So they're not controlling the line of scrimmage the way that they usually do. They're not protecting the football the way that they usually do. And I think you can feel Josh Allen really pressing with, kind of this saga with Keon Coleman, who's now been a healthy scratch the last 2 games. He was like the face of their draft class 2 years ago. And it was, I guess, some missed meeting, but they're not unhappy with the performance on the field, but he's going to be a healthy scratch for a couple games in a row, which tells you that he is. There's a reason why this team was reported to be calling on players like Jalen Waddle. That they sorely are lacking that math changer player. And I think they expected it was going to be Stephon Diggs because they paid him to a contract extension that he didn't play a single down on, because by the time he had worn out his welcome and moved his way out of Buffalo to go to Houston, that was supposed to be only the first year of the 4-year contract extension that he got from the team. So they've been left to kind of pick up the pieces for an unexpected change there, and it hasn't gone well. They're 3-4 in their last 7 football games. So they're a team that's got their work cut out for them. They've got some big-time matchups left on the schedule with at Pittsburgh, at New England, and Philadelphia is 3 of their final 6 games. So they don't have a lot of margin if they're going to chase down the Pats. They obviously have the second head-to-head, but I would pick this team right now to be one of those 6, 7, 8 seeds in the AFC and on the playoff bubble.
Which is interesting coming into this year, Z. I was going somewhere with this because look at the Ravens, even though they've won 5 in a row. Look at the Chiefs. They had to pull that one out against the Colts, which, by the way, the Patriots now in the driver's seat in the AFC along with the Broncos. So it's been crazy. We're coming into the season. We're talking about the Bills. We're talking about the Chiefs. We're talking about the Ravens. And now we're talking about all those teams being middle of the pack wild card teams. And we're week 13?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Josh is pressing, like Kyle just said, way too much. I mean, that 1 sack, oh boy, ran 51 yards to get him. Throw the ball away. At some point, you just got to throw it away. Don't worry about your quarterback rating anymore. Just throw it away. Go on to the next play. He takes a sack, like 18, 20 yards. And like I said, the guy ran 51 yards to catch him. Missed him and then got him, which is crazy. Throw the ball away. He's pressing too much. He's hurting this team.
What are you guys thinking, Kyle, Z? Both of you guys, each of you take a shot at this one. Out of those teams right now that I mentioned, Denver, Indianapolis, and New England, which team do you think is in the driver's seat? Kyle, you first.
I'm going to say New England. I think they have the softest schedule remaining. I know they're a little banged up now on the offensive line. It's kind of the storyline out of this game against Cincinnati. And they didn't play super inspired. They win by 6 points. The Bengals are at the 26-yard line in the final 45 seconds at a chance to win the game. So Will Campbell goes down with a knee injury, and Jared Wilson, the rookie left guard, has an ankle sprain. Both those guys, potential IR candidates. I think both injuries have been described this morning as like the 4 to 6 week variety where you're looking at playoffs and back. And if they get the bye week, they're going to be in good shape. But they get the Giants next week. And then they've got the bye week going into the home game against Buffalo. So they get an extra week of prep to play Buffalo. And they're at Baltimore, at New York, finish with Miami. So at 10 wins already, I think you could set a conservative floor at 12 wins for New England. And I think that's going to bode very well for their playoff seeding. And, Denver's still at 9-2. They're in great shape, but they're in a division where the Chargers on any given week, Justin Herbert is capable of making big time plays. I know their offensive tackles are down and it's hurt their pass pro. The Chiefs are trying to scratch back in, and the Colts at 8-3, they still have 4 games left to play against the Jags and the Texans combined. Like that whole thing could get turned upside down. And I would consider that to be a pretty wide open division, because I think right now Houston defense is the unit I feel the best about. And, they're 2 games back of Indy with 2 games to play against Indy. So it's hard to say how that division is going to shake out. So I'd give the nod to New England. I think they're in really good position.
Yeah, I like New England too. I'd like to pull for Denver, but because of who they got to play, in that division, everything, you just don't know. So, right now, like New England is, in the driver's seat, out of that group.
Denver, their last 4 games are Green Bay, Jacksonville, at Kansas City, and the Chargers.
That's
so
crazy.
That
insane.
4-game stretch to finish, that they got the bye at a good time. They obviously just beat the Chiefs. They get at Washington, at Las Vegas the next two, so I'll expect they'll get to 11. But Packers, Jags, Chiefs, Chargers, I think could be a very defining stretch for Denver. And if they take care of business, they go 3-1 or better in that stretch, then they will have earned that top spot in the AFC.
And no one's going to want to see the Chiefs. I mean, they've lost a lot of close games, and obviously the Denver game being one of them. They pulled one out yesterday against Indy. Z, what about the NFC? Z, start with you on this one. I love the way the Rams are playing. Stafford MVP level. McVay, I mean, who wouldn't want to play for him? The Cowboys threw a monkey wrench against the Eagles, but the Eagles haven't looked good on offense with Jalen Hurts. There's been a lot of infighting with that team this year. The running game hasn't been the same with Barkley. It's been about half of what it was production-wise a year ago. But, hey, when you're winning, you're winning, you're winning. But, hey, all of a sudden a loss here and a loss there. But then you look at that NFC North, man, every single week between Detroit, Green Bay, and Chicago, the Bears held on and beat the Steelers in a tough one, like you said. So that Central's going to have a lot to do with it as well. But the NFC, right now, I'm just looking at the Rams and then everybody a notch below them.
That's how it seems like. You can say what you want about the Bears, with their record, but they have probably the toughest schedule down the road, I believe, coming up. So we're going to see what they're all about. If they can still continue to get turnovers and not turn the ball over, they have a chance to get through the rough patch. But it's going to be a rough road for them. But the Rams are playing lights out. I mean, that quarterback is rolling. And the young defense is playing very well, too. They're flying around making plays. Right now they are a solid team, coached very well. Sean's been out there forever. He's got his system rolling. So, they're in commanding of the NFC right now.
Smashed the Bucks, Kyle, yesterday.
Yeah. First of all, I'm looking at the schedule for Chicago, and Z wasn't lying. It's at Philadelphia on a short week for Black Friday, so that doesn't help. And then you're at Green Bay. Then you get Cleveland, but then you have Green Bay again at San Francisco and Detroit to finish. So
yeah,
we're going to find out real quick about Detroit or Chicago.
I think they're going to roll Philly on Friday because of the injuries in the secondary. I mean, towards the end of the game, who was out there for Philly? Their front sevens are front seven, but it seemed like their DBs were just dropping. I know the Cowboys have two legit wide receivers that were picked and a quarterback that can get the ball out to them and all that. But I just, Philly, I think, like you said, is getting ready to explode, because it's just too much on the offense. And they come out and score 21 points in the first quarter. Right? Huh?
Implode?
Yeah, implode. Explode, implode, whatever you want to say. It's going to blow up. Is that better, Gries?
It could never get too ugly.
What are you, my English teacher? Leave me alone. So anyways, Kyle. So I just don't, come out. They got AJ.
D for Z on that one. He gets a D for English.
You done?
I'm done.
Finish? Thank you. So anyways, they got AJ going early because there were all his issues in the locker room and in social media. They got him his touchdown, blah, 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 blah. I thought they were going to roll, right? And then all of a sudden they shut it off. It just went away. And now they were scrambling. And then the defense started getting injuries and they started getting picked apart. And then the dude to catch the ball on the 1 yard line on the punt and then cough it up. Luckily, the defense showed up and got, out on downs. But are you kidding me, dude? Come on now. It's just that they're playing bad football. They're too worried about getting to 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 for the tush push every series, to extend it. And now they got to play football, and the warts are starting to show in Philly, especially on offense.
I think their offensive scheme with Kevin Patullo as the offensive coordinator, that might be as big of a downgrade in coaching as we've seen all year from what Kellen Moore did the year prior, and he obviously left to go coach in New Orleans as the head coach, and so that's Miami's problem this week. But more to Patullo is a big time drop off, and it just feels like it's very static, right? I know they're off the charts versus the rest of the league as far as just running hitch routes on the perimeter and trying to have guys run up 10 yards and stop and turn around and make yourself available to the quarterback. And if you get predictable like that, it doesn't matter that you have AJ Brown and Devonta Smith and Saquon Barkley. But to go back to the Rams, that's a football team that is an absolute wagon right now. I love Chris Shula's job on the defense with what they do with the front seven, the way that they've developed talent there, the guys they have in the backfield, and then they take a bet on a guy like Emmanuel Forbes, who really did not work out well in Washington, and he goes there and what the Rams also were in on the trade deadline. They trade for Roger McCreary from the Titans at the trade deadline, kind of had a bullseye on Emmanuel Forbes. He was big time in that game against Tampa Bay last night. So they are a team that's humming and rolling, and they are top 10 in just about every major statistical category. Stafford's got 30 touchdown passes to 2 interceptions thus far this season. They're an unbelievable class. And then what they do from a personnel standpoint, they've really leaned into 3 tight end sets and the bind that puts opposing teams in. And well, I guess we're going to play base, but do we have 3 linebackers on the field that we feel like can cover these guys? And more often than not, the answer is no, because half the teams in the league are only rostering 4 linebackers on the 53 and dressing them for game day anyway, because everybody wants the safeties. So then you get big on them and you mash them. But then their wide receivers are big too. Puka Nacua is a big physical guy and what he can do in the run game. And they had that insert route where he ends up running a cross, but he inserts through the C gap like he's blocking duo or split flow to run a crossing route across the middle. And just the geometry of what they're doing from a scheme perspective with McVay, you look at that and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't watching the game and wondering what things could look like for Miami if they retain Mike McDaniel and the personnel philosophy shifts, where you consider what it was Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill were the marquee guys. Those are not big physical receivers, right? They're guys that you ask them to block. They might put a good effort forth into block, but at the end of the day, a guy putting a good effort forth at 5'10", 190 versus a guy putting a good effort forth at 6'2", 210, you're going to get a different product when that guy is involved there. And I think that's the conflict that the Rams, with their ability to overlap their plays with different personnel packages, but the overall theme of the roster and the physicality, what they're able to do is something that I aspire to see the Dolphins try to do if they continue to work with branches of this offensive scheme.
I love that analysis and breakdown from you guys, and I want to save this for the break, but I want to put a bow on it here, so we're a little long, but look out for the 49ers, man. They have the Panthers. They have 4 of their last 6 games at home, including tonight against the Panthers. CMC's on fire. He's the best player in the league right now, and you're looking at Brock Purdy, obviously, is back for them, but when you look at their schedule, they play the Titans, they play the Browns. They're 1-1 already against the Rams, and they're 2 games behind them. They play the Bears at home. They play the Seahawks at home to finish the season, and those are games that could really help them down the stretch. So I like the Rams, Niners in that division. Both those teams looking really good right now. This is your Dolphin Squad show on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. The #1 sports podcast network in the world is the Locked On Podcast Network. We're going to come back, talk about the Dolphins' momentum. The GM's coming in next year to run the football operations. We don't know who it's going to be. Kyle has been breaking down candidates like crazy. Z and Kyle will talk about that on the other side, but no matter what, the 3 of us agree, whoever gets that job, whoever comes in to run the football operation, they're getting a team with a lot of upside and a lot of confidence being built right now. We'll tell you how they keep that momentum on your Dolphin Squad show on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, and I get a chance to tell you about FanDuel. The NBA is back. There's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So even if you miss the start of a game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making the late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Got my guys in there. That's Z and that's Kyle. We're a little bit more than halfway through this bye-week edition of the show. It would normally be a post-game edition. It would normally have been yesterday. But, guys, interestingly enough, we've broken down what could happen in the NFL, which teams we like in each conference, and we've spent a lot of time talking about the Dolphins and how they've gotten better. as the season has evolved and the offense has been scoring a bunch more points. The running game, better and better every game. Defense, opportunistic. The 5 takeaways in the last 2 games for the Miami Dolphins. So we'll talk about a little bit more about the Saints preview toward the end of the show and what the Dolphins have to do to beat them. And then, of course, we have the midweek edition on Wednesday as well. But let's get into that GM search and the momentum that this team's been playing with. Kyle, I know no shortage of candidates for you to kind of mull over and kick around, but it seems like, we're going away from, in terms of what you've been talking about and what we've been hearing and who we've been hearing as some of the bigger names. It seems like we might not be going in that big name former player comes in and creates a culture direction like a Marino or a Jason Taylor or a Zach Thomas.
Yeah, I think that would be the cherry on top for me. And Jacksonville did this where they created a power structure in which it wasn't the GM and it wasn't like the vice president of football operations who had that familiarity with Jacksonville and their brand, but Tony Baselli, who's in their executive suite, is kind of working alongside James Gladstone, who came from Los Angeles Rams to be the GM in Jacksonville, and Liam Cohen. So I think that's still maybe something that you could see folded in some way, shape, or form, but not necessarily, hey, Top Dog is a guy who's been a Dolphins career successful player that knows what it takes to be successful here. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it would be the cherry on top to have somebody in that executive level who has the experience of South Florida football and what it takes and what the heritage of the organization is and how it's been successful and how you really galvanize that and take advantage of the dynamics of one of the more challenging home field environments to play in the early portions of seasons, but how you can sustain your style of play to play and be successful late in seasons.
But isn't that what Dan does, Marino? I mean, we already have an ex-player up there.
Yeah, for Dan, it's just how involved is he, right?
Yeah,
Dan's been. They tried to make Dan. Well, I forget what the title was, but about 20 years ago, where Dan was tabbed to be like the lead of the football operation, and what he had for 48 hours, and then he was like, not a good fit, and they said, okay, well, never mind. But yes, he's on kind of that senior advisor role, but. I think the challenge, and I've heard some of the guys on the beat talk about this in putting candidates like Jason Taylor or Zach Thomas out there, is it's like Jason's in the grind because of what he's been doing from a coaching perspective. And Zach, if you get Zach to do it, Zach's going to be all in to do it all the time and going to be really hands-on. And that's for Dan. Is it just, hey, this week I feel like going in and popping in on the QB meetings and then I'll sit in the box and watch the game? Or is it that all-in approach all the time? That's what I can't intelligently speak to with Dan.
That's interesting because when I hear you say the best of both worlds, like in Jacksonville with Baselli, it almost sounds like you're saying figurehead. And I don't mean to start anything with that, that phrase. It's not what I mean here. But is it almost like the best of both worlds, Z, when you get that guy to be a quote-unquote figurehead and help set the culture, and he knows about winning, and he knows about the culture of a locker room, and he knows from an ultimate standpoint, a player like Marino or Zach, for example, because you're never going to get Zach Thomas to big-time anyone. You know what I mean? He might be a legend, but he's a lunch pail legend. He's a guy who's going to put the work in regardless, no matter what. So you're not going to get a guy like Zach to be a figurehead. But what I'm hearing Kyle say is almost like, hey, get the best of both worlds, get a quote-unquote figurehead in there who's a former player, so you give that appearance, but then you still want that other expert in there to run the actual football side of things and do things like the cap? Or is it fair to say that in this day and age, and Kyle, you respond as well, that you would want both, and you would indeed want those guys working side by side and running the team together? That's for you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say this, though, about that. You say a figurehead, you can say what you want. Someone like that is not going to change the culture in a locker room, I don't think. Because, again, as a head coach, that's your job. So let's say we're going to look for a head coach. You're not going to get any big-time head coach coming in here saying, well, I got to report to some guy that's never done this before. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't see like John Gruden coming in and having to let Zach Thomas, let's hypothetically say, he's going to set the culture in my locker room. That's what you hired me for. That's why you're paying me over $10 million to do. So I'm not reporting to some guy that's never been in there except as a player and who's, got a gold jacket, got all that. I get all that. But again, I don't see that happening. I don't see how that fits. I don't think Baselli's in there, telling the guys what to do and everything up there in Jacksonville. I know he was in all the meetings for the GM and for the head coach. But I think after that, he kind of like is now a figurehead, and he may be in on personnel meetings. He probably went to the combine and sat in those meetings and everything, gives his 2 cents, but it's just 2 cents at that point. Because you have football and you have front office. When you start mixing them and the guy upstairs is in charge of this and that, it gets very cloudy, and then you're going to be in the same predicament, on the bottom of the barrel and drafting high every year.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of that, where I think there's value in having somebody like that gives 2 cents in the process, is to help help vet the players that are going to be in the locker room that are also the living embodiment of the culture that the coach wants to instill on the team, right? And we had a lot of talk this offseason about the Dolphins and a culture rebuild. And you think about how things ended with Jalen Ramsey, and you think about how things were going with Tyreek Hill, and we find out there's 5 guys on the roster that were responsible for half the fines last year, and probably all of them are out of the picture at this stage other than Tyreek, who they brought back, and how much of that was because he had a wrist surgery and couldn't pass a physical, and they couldn't find good trade value with his guaranteed money and this, that, and the other thing, right? I reflect on some of the guys that haven't worked out in Miami, whether it's Cam Smith or Noah Benogany, or there's just 2 examples of early draft picks that the Dolphins have spent the last couple of years, and Noah doesn't work out. He was young. He was 20 when he was drafted. All the pressure that goes with being a first-round pick. And it took him leaving to kind of get a fresh start, to kind of kickstart his ability to play. And then for Cam Smith was in the doghouse with Vic Fangio, 5 seconds after he got here? Like, they played Ethan Bonner over him that rookie season. And then he was on and off IR and struggled his second season. And then he makes the roster this year with the needs that the Dolphins have at corner, but then goes on non-football illness, and they waive him. And I don't think he's on a team at all right now. So that's where I think the vetting of the players is where you can have input from a former player who's in the room with the decision makers that can kind of give some input that I think can be valuable to do what we're talking about, but also not tread over that line that Z's talking about the coach being the one from the top down who instills the leadership in the locker room. And I know Mike's very player locker room. It's your guys' locker room. It's you guys are have to be the ones that are accountable to each other for that. And if you have wrong players that are in there because you didn't vet them right before you drafted them, or because they're a guy in their late 30s who's there for a 1-year stop in a nice place with nice weather, and they're not invested in the success of the team like a Jordan Poyer was last year, the way that they should be, then that's where I think you can find some value in having that extra voice.
I like the way you put that. And I also think that a lot's going to depend on what they really want to do with Mike. And if Stephen Ross has it in his head that he really wants to keep Mike and find a GM who wants to work with Mike, that changes the whole search, because as you know, most guys have their own guys, right? You hire anybody who is going to come in and run a football organization top to bottom. There's not a guy out there who's going to have a plan for an organization to come in who's going to say, yeah, give me that coach. I want that coach. There's not a guy out there who wants that coach that I can think of that would want Mike, right? You want to come in, you want to bring your own people, you want to bring your own coach. Some coaches are the GM, that you want to go in that direction and give a coach power over personnel decision. I mean, there's so many different factors for Stephen Ross to think about here. I mean, how much power do you want to give one person? Do you want to balance it out amongst people? I mean, so many things to consider here that we don't know. We're not flies on those walls.
Yeah, but I still think if he decides to keep Mike, I think a GM will work with Mike, and then, because the GM knows in the back of his head, if it doesn't work out with Mike the first year, he's going to be gone. He's going to get his coach. But I still think he'll come in and be professional about it and take his, his coach, because he's going to, at the end of the day, if it's a big name guy who everybody's after, Mr. Ross is going to say, hey, listen, if it doesn't work out with Mike, we will replace him, and then you go get your coach that you want. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm sure that'll be talked about in those meetings. It has to be.
It has to be. And ideally for Ross, Kyle, I think still he wants to keep Mike. I think he wants to, in his gut, keep Mike McDaniel long term. I've heard every name in the world thrown out there, but there's guys like Lane Kiffin and there's guys like John Gruden, and they just keep stirring that pot with the names that are out there. But I still believe that Ross, in his heart of hearts, wants Mike here.
Yeah, if it were me, my name's not Stephen Ross, but if it were me, and the season plays out and the Dolphins are competitive and say they go 3-3 over the final 6 games, hypothetically, they finish 7-10. A part of my decision, I would prioritize the general manager first and foremost. And if I fell head over heels in love with a guy and anything that was pre-existing before he's getting here is a deterrent from me getting who I firmly believe is that guy, then I'm going to let him come in and make his decisions. And if he wants to move on, then so be it. And I understand that there's a pre-existing relationship with Mike McDaniel that can make that challenging. But I look at the coaching candidates that are out there this year. And if I'm going to move on from giving Mike one more year, it might be decided for me based on who else enters the coaching pool. I think there's some candidates who are currently with teams that if they shook loose, they might have interest with already having pre-existing head coaching experience. But to make a change just for the sake of making a change and not having attractive options, like that's something I would be leery of too. Because you have seen, you kind of know what Mike is and isn't. You understand where the blind spots are. You understand the Rams burned a timeout in the first 5 minutes of the game because Stafford's sitting there telling them to get the play call in. And Dolphins fans identify with that moment very well because they're always burning timeouts because the play calls aren't getting it fast enough. So some of that is just kind of the nature of the beast, and you understand that. It's a very long way of saying if it were me, I would be leery about moving on from Mike just for the sake of moving on from Mike, especially because the contract situation that exists with Tua and understanding, well, you're going to 26 is a year you're going to have to be accountable for in several ways that you don't have a lot of flexibility with. And then if it doesn't work out, you can make a change.
Yeah, and I guess what we're not hearing is that guy out there who just gets you so excited as a coaching candidate that you say, hey, I want that guy as my coach. I don't care who the GM is. Make it work around that guy. And that guy is not out there. I mean, we're not hearing from either one of you guys that there's a guy out there that you would say, bring me that guy as the coach. I don't care. Bring me that guy as the GM for that matter. I don't care. You're saying make the best possible decision, Kyle, and go from there. And we're up against the break. But on the other side, before we get too much into the Saints preview, some really important picks for whoever's in charge coming up. You have some really important decisions to make with Tua's contract and other expiring contracts for that matter. Do you extend guys? Do you keep them here? So many things as far as that goes. But then who do you pick? Who do you select? Best in terms of need, offensive and defensive lines, and then all of a sudden everything starts to look more attractive. So we'll keep it here on that topic. It's your Dolphin Squad show. If you're watching live on YouTube, it'll be the blink of an eye. And if you are listening wherever you get your podcast, we'll wrap it up here on the other side. And just like that, we are back. That's Kyle Krabs, Mr. Miami Dolphin himself, Locked On Dolphins podcast. Look, number 10, the number 10 channel on the number 1 podcast network in the world, thanks to one guy right there, Kyle Krabs, and his relentless work day in, day out, year in, year out. Z and I are lucky to benefit from all that work. That's former Dolphin Jeff Scanina in the middle right there. I'm Jim Gries, call me Gries. And, guys, I'll start with you, Z, on this one, and then we'll put a bow on this topic. I'm not hearing that you are in love with any hold on. I almost said I'm not hearing that you're in love with any guy, which would probably be true. But as far as a coaching candidate, right? Not in love with any coaching candidate out there who you're saying, hey, I want that guy. I don't give a damn what they have to do to get him. I don't care if it's tampering. I don't care if he's under contract. I don't care if we have to follow him to the moon. I don't care if we have to give Brady a piece of ownership, whatever it is. I'm not hearing that there is that guy out there for Jeff Scanina.
No, I mean, I haven't really looked at a list or anything. You hear names all the time, like you said, Lane earlier and Gruden. I mean, every year it's Gruden. It's been every year since he left Tampa way back when. Every year is he coming out of the TV thing just to get more money from TV, and then it's this and it's that. Then the Raiders finally, got him out, and then that whole debacle, right? And now every year since then, it's been Gruden for this college job, Gruden for this pro job. It's like a never ending thing. I think, John just likes hearing his name on TV 24/7, because it sells money. It makes him money, So I think he does want to coach again, but I don't think, I don't know. I don't see him coming to South Florida. I just don't. I don't at all. And so it's not like because again, you bring a guy like Gruden in, you're gonna have to. He's gonna hire his GM. That's
That's what happened in
guaranteed.
Las Vegas.
Yeah,
They hired
he's gonna
Mayock, and he
handpick.
had personnel control. That's
Yeah.
what happened.
Kyle, you don't like the Gruden idea either, do you?
Not from that idea, no.
No.
I saw what they did with 6 first-round draft picks in 3 years, and it didn't really work out. You think the 2020 Dolphins draft class was bad? Go Google the 2019 Raiders first-round draft class, and look what they did with 3 draft picks, and that included Cleveland Ferrell in the top 5.
Yeah, top 5, number 4.
Not from that perspective, and maybe his outlook is a little different because he's had the suit against the league, and maybe he's a little bit more willing to play ball with somebody. But no, I think that time away, and he's already had 1 decade plus departure from the league before coming back in with the Raiders in the first place, and he got the moon to come coach the Raiders a second time. I look at some of the candidates that are out there as popular names, and Mike McCarthy, I think, is a really high floor coach with the experience that he has in both Dallas and Green Bay. And
coach, right? Yeah.
They win a lot of football games with Mike McCarthy. And I think there's some organizations across the league that would die to have the kind of year in and year out win-loss record as what Mike McCarthy's teams have had. But outside of that, Lane Kiffin, who's the big fish, who you mentioned, who's getting overtures from LSU and Florida and Penn State and every program with an opening in college as well. And Ole Miss is trying to keep him. Bill Belichick, like, come on now. It's guys like Jeff Hafley, who I really like, who was a head coach at Boston College and is now the DC in Green Bay. He's got head coaching experience, but it's in college. Robert Saleh, who was with New York, and I don't hold it not working out in New York against Robert Saleh because I've seen what it looked like in New York before Robert Saleh got there, and I've seen what it's looked like in New York since Robert Saleh's left. And I think Robert Saleh can coach his rear end off, but is that a name that really moves the needle on to your point, Gries, we need to move heaven and earth to get this guy to be our head football coach. I don't think we're there yet with Robert and kind of the rehab and being back in San Francisco, but I think he's done an outstanding job this year. Jesse Minter, the Chargers DC, Chris Shula, the Rams DC, Vance Joseph, the Broncos DC, Matt Nagy, like Anthony Campanile and Jackson, like Clint Kubiak, the Seattle offensive coordinator. These are the names that are getting thrown around right now as head coaching candidates. And I think Chris Shula is the most impressive resume as far as what he did coming up through, the way that he went his own way about it, despite the last name that he had, where he didn't take the handouts and he didn't really lean into the nepotism that would have allowed him to take shortcuts. I admire that. He's got a relationship with Sean McVay going back to when they were college roommates together playing for Miami of Ohio. And he's known him for forever, and he worked his way up with Sean, but after he had several stops in college first. So that would be an amazing story, but he's also very young. He's only had the DC title for a couple of years, and they obviously have great talent to work with that they've invested a lot of draft capital to get a talent group in there, and I think he's done a great job of developing it. But none of these coaches are like, now if John Harbaugh, if Baltimore falls apart and they make a change there, or if Mike Tomlin shakes loose in Pittsburgh, like I think that changes the dynamics a little bit of who's available to be the head coach of the team. But that's what I was alluding to before the break, and I might be looking to see who else shakes loose to help me make my decision on how much conviction I have on whether or not 2026 is another Mike McDaniel year or not.
Does Philly do something stupid if they fall apart? Stuff like that. You never know, right? And they look like a team that could fall apart, right? Philadelphia this year. And I'm always hoping the Eagles fall apart, just for the record. But Z, what a great story that would be, because the last time a young coach named Shula came in and took the Miami Dolphins head job, it worked out pretty well. But can you imagine Shula coming here and being the head coach of the Dolphins all these years, all these decades later? And he really is one of those up-and-coming guys, one of those hot, young, up-and-coming coaches that so many people love. Defensive-minded coach. Z, I don't know. I mean, you don't hire a head coach because of a story, but what better story would there be than Shula becoming the head coach here?
Yeah, but that's a lot of pressure for a young kid. First time out the gate now. I mean, that is he's coming into a problem where he's got to fix an offense, fix a quarterback, and he's a defensive guy. I would think that if they did make a change, it had to be an offensive guy just because of all the issues on the offense. I get our defenses, had some issues too, but a lot of it was injuries, and young players. But offense, you got a quarterback who's on the hook for a lot of money, and you got to figure out a way to get him to play. And I don't, it depends who he brings as offensive coordinator. He'd probably bring someone from the McVay tree, which is what Mike basically is right now. You know what I'm saying? So does that excite you? I mean, there's a lot of factors that, if you're picking somebody, you have to look at. And to me, that's one of them. I would rather have a coach that has had head coaching experience, Now, Saleh, he's a hell of a defensive coach. I worked for the guy, What was his problem in New York? A quarterback problem.
Yeah, quarterback, yeah.
You come down here, there's the same thing fucking show up again, excuse me. You know what I'm saying? So you got to think about that. Vance, he's been in South Florida as a coordinator. He's been through it, what South Florida's all about. And his defense is rolling up there. He could bring that down here, already have been around the culture of the building and the atmosphere outside the building. Get the defense rolling until the offense and the quarterback situation pans out. That could be intriguing. And again, McCarthy, I worked for him. He's a hell of a football coach. He can fix a lot of things on the offensive side. Is what he brings on defense is going to tell the tale.
It'd be interesting too, because Mike being an offensive coach, do you bring in another offensive coach? And you know what, Z, you're gonna love this. Kyle, I bet you too. I'm reading things during the show. I'm always looking for new information, new things, especially during a bye week. And I'm like, hey, I wonder what this guy has to say at AZ Sports. And I'm reading down there. Oh man, it's Kyle Krabs. I'm reading a Kyle Krabs story right now on AZ Sports as I'm doing my in-show cross prep. Kyle, you're everywhere, man, everywhere. And it's the Dolphins bye week. Recovery looks ready to pay off as another top defensive starter set to take a major step back. That's the kind of coverage that we get from Kyle Krabs everywhere we go.
Yeah, it's excited to see what they end up rolling out here against New Orleans. And I think for Darren Waller, whose 21-day window is opening, is this the start of the traditional cycle of, well, you're going to get your practice window open and you'll practice this week, but you won't play in the game, but then we can get you ready to play in the next game if things go well? Or was that week, did he have any kind of exercise ramp up during the bye week to do stuff on his own where he could be uniquely in a position with the activation window to play on Sunday against New Orleans? I think that's really fascinating. Mike in his press conference kind of teased the idea of Larry Bourne being capable of playing guard. And with Austin Jackson expected to be back, I think there's a number of different spots where all these offensive issues that have kind of drove you nuts amidst the spurts and the good running of the football. You could get another tight end back to load up and go heavy. You could potentially get two spots better on the offensive line at once. And I think that really sets the stage for what will be a fun evaluation window the final 6 weeks of the season.
It's crazy too when I look at this Saints team and they looked better against Carolina and everything's starting to click offensively and they're stopping the run and they ran the ball a little bit better. And then you watch this latest debacle against Atlanta and it's like, man, what happened to this team week to week? And we'll be breaking it down a lot more on Wednesday, but certainly the Saints looked like they were going in a better direction. And then all of a sudden this last game against Atlanta, they got served and smoked by Cousins out there too. And then Kamara, to Kyle's point earlier, with the knee injury, and it just did not look like the same team.
No, again, they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't stop the run. I mean, I turned the game on. I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch this, get excited, see some of my ex-players that I've coached play, and it was like, oh my God, this was like night and a day what I've seen, like clips here and there, previous weeks. They got to figure it out down there. I mean, we've been trying to figure it out, but again, they could not run the ball and they could not stop the run at all.
So good things for Miami as we head into this week against the Saints, and we'll have our show on Wednesday and we'll preview this game a lot more. Before we do, Kyle, what else do you have coming up on the channel this week? And then what are your final thoughts for the show today?
Yeah, we're going to look at a couple more executive GM candidates as we don't have a game to kind of detox. So today and tomorrow is a little bit more of the bye week style content. I have a crossover Thursday with Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints. He's one of the best, the cream of the crop. He's the NFL channel manager, so you know that he's walking the walk as far as the quality of the analysis and the programming. So I'm excited to cross over with him. And then we'll set that blueprint for the roadmap to beat New Orleans and the matchups to know and really dig into the nuts and bolts of the tape on Friday as well.
That's going to be a lot of fun. Z, you got anything to add before we bounce?
No, I'm looking forward to Wednesday. Talk some more ball and really get into the Saints a little bit more.
Someone said we need to get you a bleep button, Z.
What week is it? The first time ever. So there you go.
Right? That's good.
Yeah, I've been doing good.
Doing great. And what a show we had here today. Don't forget, we're live on YouTube, and then we upload, you download Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher, Podbean, and of course, Roku. And we will be back on Wednesday. That is noon Eastern. And we will be back again, of course, after the game on Sunday. So technically 3 shows in a week, but they're set up differently with calendar weeks. So 2 this week, 2 next week. And hopefully the Fins will get us another win on Sunday. We'll talk to you after that game with Z, with Kyle, with me, Gries, with your Dolphins Squad show on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the #1 sports podcast network.